Eliminations in the game of Mikalon. Now, first gonna start out by kind of defining the whole idea of an elimination. And an elimination occurs when the Hylosian, the player with this Hylos, flings the Pilo and strikes the body of an opponent. Chest, head, butt, leg, arm, hand, you're out. When you're out, you go to the sidelines and you wait until the game is over. Because in the game of Mikalon, a match is just a set of games. So, once that occurs, you're struck, you're out. However, if the ball hits your Hylos, the ball hits your shield, it's not an elimination. It's not like you're playing paintball, where like the gun kind of qualifies as being part of the body. We're going to make this really simple. If it's just like a war, unless you're shot, you're not injured, you're not dead. So that's just the way that it works in the game of Mikalon. It also works in the same basic idea. If I take my Hylos and I fling it, and I hit my teammates, guess what? Your team's out. Your teammate's out. It's just a friendly fire issue. So be very, very careful. Doesn't matter how you got struck, you're out. Okay, now, players that are on the field of play, every single one of them is subject to being eliminated. Doesn't matter what position you are. Even if you're, say, the Dalan. And I'll give you an example. Say, here's your Dalan, and he's carrying the Dala, and he's coming upfield. And he's moving across the field and saying, I'm getting really close, we're going to score. Some guy nails the guy, right with the Pilo. In the game of Mikalon, if a player carrying the Dala is struck, he must drop the Dala prone on the ground. The ball then becomes live, and that player must leave the field of play. Rule in the game of Mikalon. Okay. If you have the ball, and you're carrying the Pilo, and you run out of bounds, which we discussed earlier, you're out, and the ball is dead. If you happen to cross your opponent's cogga line, you're out. You're eliminated, and you must leave the field of play. But there's a special case on this side of the field, because if the Pilo is in your opponent's side of the field, your opponent can retrieve the ball. It's kind of, the Kaga is kind of the safe zone in Mikalon. So even if you have the ball and you're feeling a lot of defensive pressure, you can, say you're here, you can actually, with the Pilo, retreat back into your Kaga zone for a reasonable period of time, which will be determined by the official. Usually it's between 5 and 10 seconds or so. And then you can come back onto the field of play or pass the ball by any means necessary. But if you don't, the ball will be determined to be dead, and the player carrying the ball will be eliminated from the match. Now, these are not the only ways that you can be eliminated from a match. Say you're running along the field of play, and your opponent hip checks you, just pushes you, not nails you in the head with a fist, but bumps you out of bounds. You're out. So be really, really careful about play around the perimeter of the field. You get kicked out of bounds, you go over the top rope, down to the floor, you are out of the match. And if you happen to be carrying a ball at the time, that ball's out of the match too, regardless of what ball that is. Especially if it's the Dala. That ball goes out of bounds, the Dala's out too. Dala's also dead. Okay. Okay, striking out of bounds players. There's players in a game, and there's players outside the game. Say there's a bench over here, and there's two guys. There's two guys that are out here. You take the ball and hit that guy on purpose. You're going to get carded for that. There's a good chance you're going to be carded for it. You could be eliminated right at that time, but then again, in the game of Mikalon, sometimes discipline falls to the end of a game, and then he calls in some of the players and deals out the discipline. This kind of stuff is really not looked upon well in the game of Mikalon. Another example, in the game of Mikalon, sometimes there can be bailing and also player substitution one for another, but the player substitution has to happen through one player standing in one of these circles known as tanzus, and then one player runs in and the other player runs out. You are not allowed to throw balls at players in a tanzu. If you're not on the field of play, you cannot do that. You can be eliminated and or carded for that. Like I said, if you get eliminated from a match, you go to their respective sidelines and you wait until the game is over. If the official thinks that someone has struck someone with a pillow with malice and on purpose, like I said, there's cards and things like that in the game of Mikalon, and we really don't look upon that in a good light. If you happen to eliminate your opposition totally before there is a score, you get 5 points. At which time, there's something known as a reset. Everyone comes back on the field of play, and we begin the kopea in the method that was previously discussed in the preliminary section. The Eliminations, game of Mikalon.